Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome once again to Thursday's teissTalk. As you can tell, we're a little bit late. We had a few technical issues, and by we, I mean me, so I do apologize for that. We do have a fantastic show for you today. Better security awareness training with AI. Two of my favorite subjects there, security awareness training and AI. We're going to do well. Welcome also to our LinkedIn viewers. If you are on LinkedIn, please don't hesitate to join us on the actual teissTalk website, because there you will be able to ask a question. And why is that so important, you ask? Well, because whoever asks the most interesting, the most challenging, the funniest, or even just the only question will be the winner of a much coveted teissTalk mug. I know people who have 4, 5, and even 6 of these. I've just got the one myself. So without further ado, let's move on, shall we? Can I ask onto the stage Rebecca and Ben?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are we both?
I'm
Very
good.
well, thank you. And you, Tom?
Excellent. Yes, not too bad. Sweating a little after that little delay and a little reboot in between, and an unscheduled background because, well, it all went a bit wrong, basically. So, but that's fine. Shall we move on? Let's move straight on to the news item, which, let's see, let's pop this news item up in the chat. There we go. Email phishing attacks surge as attackers bypass security controls. Well, this could be really a headline from last year, year before, year before that, year before that, right? It does seem to me that we have an awful lot of these kinds of headlines, and it's just more of the same over and over.
Well, it is, but I mean, what really is disturbing is the fact that the number is always increasing as well. And
Yeah.
the new emerging threats with AI, we've got a new thing to battle against. And if the threat vectors are going to be using AI, then we really should be using it in response in training our people and our colleagues in order to, be as best prepared for this kind of attack as we can.
I couldn't agree more. It seems that online threat actors continue to consider an organization's employee base to be the easiest, cheapest, most accessible attack vector. And Rebecca, you've said it quite nicely indeed. The tooling that is available to them now is also cheap and easily accessible. Just at the bottom of the article, it talks about an AI solution that's able to identify weaknesses in secure email gateways. These tools are pretty scary. So yeah, I can't see this trend changing, if I'm honest.
And it seems to come back to the age-old problem of we just need to get the basics right. Would that be about right?
I think so, but also, I mean, one of the things that are mentioned in the article really hit home to me based on an experiment we recently did at Highlands College, which is the part that talks about the emergence of multi-channel attacks. And if I just quote directly here, it says the other key element is psychological. People have
Yeah.
been taught to be very careful about clicking links on email, but often are not trained about clicking links on Teams and WhatsApp. And I think working with lots of young people as I do at Highlands College and knowing how influenced they are by social media and using phones, and how we are encouraged to use our mobile phones in the workplace now as well. I mean, I've got Teams and Outlook on my mobile phone too. That way you interact with your mobile device can be a lot different. It's a lot more reactive. You're less likely to see these things. And we're training people conventionally using laptops. Is it time that we start moving some of our training with AI, but also considering doing the training on mobile phones as well, in order to sort of like move with the times? Whatever channels we've got out there for social media and communication, they're going to be attacked. So I think some of the training needs to be a bit more generic and a bit about how we respond when we are faced with information that we think is true and it isn't, rather than just going through those standard emails that say, oh, do you like the look of this link? Do you like the look of this email address? I think we need to think a bit further ahead now.
Yeah, I again completely agree. I help run security awareness at Canon, and one of the what we continuously focus on is security behaviors. When you talk about getting the basics right, yes, it is around creating a culture of secure behavior. It's about reporting when you're suspicious and letting people know what to be suspicious of. But there are some changes in the sort of threat landscape that we do need to keep people aware of. One of which Rebecca's highlighted. It's the change in attacks on certain devices. But another is sort of what happens after an incident has occurred. So if an individual receives a suspicious email, yes, there are the elements of the email that they need to be aware of, but also what about the page that they're sent to afterwards that's designed to capture your credentials. We need to keep people aware of also what a trusted URL and a trusted login page should look like. I just got shown this afternoon something by our security investigations lead on how easy it is to set up a malicious page that clones an organization's login page. It just took him an evening last night, and he showed us a demo today. It's yeah, again, coming back to how easily accessible these tools are, how threat actors can become more and more sophisticated every day. Yes, there's the culture, but there's also slight variances in security behaviors we need to be keeping on top of for our employee base.
But it does seem that every time we send educational and awareness pieces out there, and we say, be careful of messages that you're not expecting, the context has to be correct, all that sort of stuff. And yet over a quarter of the phishing emails that involve impersonation are from brands that are not connected to the recipient at all. So 1 in 4 times, effectively, people are going, I have no idea who this company is. I have nothing to do with them. I've not ordered from them. I've not interacted with them, but I'm still going to click the link and log in anyway.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's the way we are quite disengaged with technology when we use it. We are not always as on the ball as we could be. There are emerging psychologists coming out, Dr. Amisi Jar being one that springs to mind immediately, who talks really about the role of attention. Now, she's not talking about for cybersecurity attacks. She's talking about generally in life, how we've lost this ability to stay switched on and be on the ball, but also how to not expect to be completely switched on the whole day, because we can't be. So it's about self-awareness. Are we aware of where our attention is at? Because if we are not, that's when we are most vulnerable, regardless of the information that's being put in front of us. So we've got all these biases going on as well. We're complicated, we're human beings, and we are more complicated than the technology. Which kind of leads me on to the project we did just last week at Highlands College, because it all goes down to the root causes, which is that just being a human is what's leading to some of these mistakes. And we put together an experiment to see if we could use AI and virtual reality in order to look at the root cause of why somebody would have their perception shifted in order to think they need to do something other than what reality says you should. So I'll just describe what we did. We got some VR headsets and we went through various simulations. They were so cool. We went on a moonwalk where we ended up outside of a spacecraft floating through outer space effectively, and we also played a game like a virtual cops and robbers as a bank heist as well. And these are not in any way directly connected to traditional cybersecurity training as we know it. In fact, cybersecurity was not in the theme at all whilst we were doing this, but the students and the teachers had an immersive experience in what it's like to think you're doing one thing because of the information that is immersed in front of you, when really reality is something else. The reality is that we were running around an empty classroom, okay? But people were experiencing real psychological and emotional feelings as they were doing this. If you stepped outside the aircraft, you lost your balance, for example.
Yeah.
If you were running around the bank and you went up and down the lift, you had that feeling like, your stomach feels like you're moving when you weren't. And these were all powerful ways to remind people that not everything in front of you is as it seems. Your perception, your mind can trick you into thinking there is something else. So do we need to rethink how we train people in cybersecurity, and can we immerse more people this way and reach more learners? Because that's how I see people, as learners, because of the education background. Because really, we want these messages and these things to stick. And putting dry training in front of people where you just go through multiple choice questions once a year doesn't hit the mark for everyone, because not everybody receives and retains information that way. I don't know how Ben feels about that, if he's had any similar experiences, really.
I was going to say, I doubt anybody really absorbs information well that way. Sorry, Ben, go on.
I completely agree. It's very difficult as an awareness professional to identify how the right way to educate people en masse, especially when an organization might have a compliance requirement to push something big out and budgetary constraints that make doing something tailored quite difficult. And Tom, the example you gave of someone clicking on something, even though there are various triggers to alert them that there's something wrong, Rebecca summarized it quite nicely. I remember reading in a Know Before report, the biggest driver of an individual clicking on a phishing link is distraction. It's caused by people multitasking. And so there are some, outside of the awareness space, there are some technical prompts you can put in place to try and help people, not just technical, also administrative, that will help people, at the point of performing that negative action. A lot of us in organizations will be familiar with the from external tag when we receive an email from outside of our organization, another banner that might tell us that we don't receive an email very often. But there are other controls we can put in place. For example, we always talk about closing our laptops or locking them when we're leaving them unattended. Well, if you have some stickers or something on people's desk or on the way out of the building or their sort of key desk area, reminding them to shut their desk down, there's a lot of research to support that over time, that repeat practice, that repeat messaging can lead to positive behaviors in the future. But at the end of the day, it's every individual is different. And I think completely ruling out the possibility that someone will click on something, even if there are red flags, I don't know if that's possible.
And on another point on that, and coincidentally, I'm reading a book by Malcolm Gladwell called Talking to Strangers, and it talks about, how the perception of what people see and what it makes them believe, etc., and how we have a default to trust mechanism as human beings. By default, we trust what people say to us, what people deliver to us, what people give to us, and what we see in front of us, because as a biological trait, it's what allows communities to grow, and allows us to actually operate as as a society, because the payoff to trust but occasionally be tricked is far greater than to not trust. And so I think we're not just overcoming, technical or distraction or anything like that. We're actually trying to overcome human physical traits that define us as human beings and sentient beings to trust what we see. And we're probably getting to a tipping point where actually trusting everything is not going to work for us anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was working at St Mason's in a similar role to what Ben's got, we very much pushed forward the idea of zero trust. I now work in a profession where actually there is a bit of zero trust going on. Not all teachers and lecturers want to jump on the technology bandwagon as fast as everyone else. In fact, I was at an AI conference just a few months ago, run by the Association of Colleges, and it was brilliant. It was all online, but we were really being pushed to get our staff and our colleagues to be what they call digitally promiscuous in it, and actually have more goals and click on more things and join more things in order to learn more about the AI and the technologies that are emerging out there, so that our students can have a better learning experience. But I think if you're going to do that, you've got to have some kind of security training embedded
Yeah.
in that at source.
Yeah.
You can't not. And actually, for the environment I'm working in, it's not just about security, it's about safeguarding as well. So it is serious stuff. You really need to be conscious about this. But that's made me think about the life cycle of a person and where that fits into the supply chain of HR in a way. I mean, if you think about it, where I work now, we are preparing the future workforce that's going to be working in places like Ben's firm. So,
Yeah.
do we need to start our cyber training earlier on in schools? Now, we already do it from a safeguarding point of view, but do we need it from that email point of view and that phishing attack point of view as well? And so this brings me on to a poll I'd like to do. Do we need to involve corporations within schools to help deliver that cybersecurity training? Yes or no? I mean, I'm not saying how that could happen. I'm just saying, on principle, is this something where education and industry need to be working hand in hand, and industry need to be saying, this is what we need your students to learn, whilst their brains has still got a lot more neuroplasticity in learning that zero trust?
Now, new platform, new technology. Everybody should have seen a little poll question pop up, which you have to answer, which is why we've put a not sure in there, in case you're, you know, a little shy maybe. But do vote away. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. We'll just let some results come in. Never run a poll on this platform before. Let's see what happens. I mean, we don't even know how we're going to show you the results yet. So, but let's see what happens. But yeah, it's an age-old problem, isn't it, with education? Because we all agree that these are skills that we should learn from, you know, kindergarten, basically, because we've got access to these devices all the way through, and yet there is not. It's not part of the curriculum. It's not enforced at any kind of educational level. There aren't any formal classes. It's down to quite literally volunteers and you know, the goodwill of people in very discrete areas. You know, normally areas that you know, that can afford to spend that time. That not only have the skills, but can afford to spend that time with the schools. So it's a very challenging one. And while we're waiting for the results, let's just look at some of the comments that have come in. We've got Hendrik. Thank you, Hendrik. Motivating people to alert when suspicious mail is received and always react with an explanation of why that mail was or was not a phishing or other malicious message. Encouraging them to share their doubts and the responses amongst their direct co-employees. And don't forget the supply chain. I mean, it's very true. I mean, it's a lot of work involved here. Peter, hello, Peter. Thank you. And within the corporations, we haven't even come longer than talking about long passwords. Don't reuse, enable, MFA, etc. It's true. We've barely made a dent in half of this stuff. Grey and fuzzy zone between private and workspaces doesn't help either. And finally, from I'm going to butcher your name, Lorenzo. So my apologies for that, but thank you, Lorenzo. Requesting messages may lead to repeating messages may lead to alert fatigue, which is a risk in itself, which is very true. So there's a lot to get on there. Oh, my camera has switched off once more. What is that? There's something not very happy at the moment. You might have to just do without looking at me for the time being. Yes. Have we got any results in? Talking to the teissTalk in the background. Let's say, oh, well, there we go. I think that says everything, doesn't it? That we really do need to be doing this. When we've got a full 100% on this, I think it's quite clear that we need to do better.
Well, I'm really happy to see that result actually, because I mean, we undergo a staff training. We provide security and social media, social bullying training through our life skills pathway for all of our students. And the students sign an acceptable use standard as well, obviously, when they come into college, as do the staff. But to make that link between the workplace where we are providing our students for and give that context whilst they are still students and taking on this information is so important. These guys are what we would call digital natives. I would call myself a digital immigrant because I didn't use technology that way when I was growing up. But that can make for quite reactive behaviour and a bias towards using mobile phones, which, as we all know, can accelerate the amount of phishing that you can be susceptible to just by that very nature of being reactive and clicking on links so much quicker than you might do if you were on a laptop or a PC. So having that kind of link between industry and schools, I think, is part of what we can do, you know, to bolster ourselves up against these attacks.
Yeah.
Rebecca, do
So
you
I think
find that the
Go on, Ben.
sorry, Rebecca, I was just going to ask, do you find that digital native generations tend to be more vigilant towards social engineering threats than potentially the non-digital native generations?
Well, I'd have to do a bit of a study on that to get some exact examples. But what I do find is that the students, everybody uses their mobile phones, staff and students at our college. We even have our own app to help students find where they've got their timetables and what rooms they're supposed to be in, just because we know that's more accessible for them. But basically, if I look at my own children who I watch use their mobile phones, we've encouraged our children to use digital from a very early age. They are more reactive and quick and do not absorb that information in the same way on a mobile phone as they do if we put them in front of the PC. They are just faster because it's designed. That's how it's designed. It's designed for us to be intuitive and reactive and to do things quickly. I think there is a new layer or level of training that needs to go in that takes that into consideration. And when we're looking at all the different areas in which we can be attacked now, and the fact that it is so easy, like the article says, to get hold of software that can help you create the phishing attacks, I think we need to be looking at the root cause of how we interact with our technology. And going back to the experiment, do we know ourselves when we are behaving in a certain way with technology? So, yeah.
So let's pull this back. I think we've obviously moved squarely into the panel proper, as it were. But the first point here about leveraging behavioral AI to mitigate the risk of phishing attacks. Now, are we talking about putting something on the endpoint? Are we talking about something that's or something that's on the perimeter, or are we actually talking about using AI to educate people so that they can actually recognize these in the first place? Because let's face it, the criminals are moving at the speed of AI, therefore we need to as well.
It's a collection of all of the above. Tom, recently I've been reaching out to a lot of different security service vendors to try and understand, from an awareness standpoint, what new services can be offered, how can we utilize a third party to support our security awareness journey. And they've shown us some really cool AI-based features, like one of which is when a user reports a suspicious email, an agent on the endpoint will perform an initial analysis on that email to provide some I guess, first response feedback. So it will tell the user whether the URL included in the hyperlink is known to be malicious, whether the sender characteristics or whether the sender address itself or the domain is known to be malicious, or whether it contains typical characteristics of your organization. So it will be able to give the user immediate feedback on whether the system thinks it's a malicious, legitimate, or spam-based email. And that does a couple of things. Over time, that helps train the user as to what the typical signs of a malicious versus a spam versus a legitimate email are, but it also potentially lowers the load on the security operations team. And you talked about some systems on the periphery, on the network. These detection systems that are available now are able to do much more sophisticated behavioral analysis for each individual user. So if we see suspicious user activity, an artificial intelligence agent is able to use historical activity to determine whether that account activity is truly suspicious or not. One simple example could be working location. If an individual is typically traveling between two locations, a system may be able to remove certain false positives, but at the same time, if a user does, if a VIP user does, potentially worldwide travel, including to high risk areas, it may be able to spot anomalies better, to be able to better spot a truly malicious action versus what may be identified as a human being to be a false positive. So it's a combination of different technical systems to me that that help support the blue team in detecting real life threats that it seems to be proliferating.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Ben more. I mean, you wouldn't focus on just one area. The threat actors certainly aren't. They're covering all their bases. We need to as well. But I would say those technologies sound absolutely fantastic, and I am aware of a few products out there that do that. But I think, as the article was pointing out, these do need to be extended out to all our forms of communication and not just email. The younger generation that will be coming through into the workforce in the next 5 to 10 years aren't big fans of email use. They would much prefer to do their comms in different ways. So and comms is only going to get bigger. There are only going to be new platforms, new versions of WhatsApp or Snapchat or whatever. And to be able to encompass all of those would really be key to that. And you get different behavioral traits on those different platforms. So just looking at those, you will be able to tailor the AI to those behavioral traits on those different platforms. So that would be the ideal if that scope could broaden and take all of that in.
So an interesting question and comment from Lorenzo again about that model that will analyze the email firsthand. Where is the learning data hosted? Which is, I think, very important nowadays. And what is it mixed in with? Who owns the data then? E.g., a false positive email that was flagged by an employee in the email is actually legit and of a confidential nature. Now, Ben, I know you're not the vendor that's selling this stuff, but it's quite valid actually, isn't it? Because the thing with AI is often the models they use are shared. They come from and in fact, part of the strength is they're shared because the sheer volume of data that they can pull upon or draw down upon is far greater. But it does end up with does have risks.
Certainly, I think for any organization, it's the privacy risk of an artificial intelligence platform that is the biggest concern, especially today. I mean, just from the conversations we're having internally, we've been very cautious about utilizing AI platforms internally because we really need an answer to that question. What is our data being used for? Is it being utilized to influence the training model? Is that data that our employees are providing to your system? Where is it being stored, and how accessible is it to other, if it's stored in some sort of cloud infrastructure, is it accessible by other customers? So it is a big concern. And to my knowledge, one of the biggest controls you can put in place is legal controls. Make sure that any contractual agreement you have with a service provider has multiple clauses that protect you and protect your information. And I can't give you the answer. I'm not a privacy specialist. I can't give you the answers to what those clauses exactly should be. But as long as you have enough collaboration within your organization, both your legal and privacy teams, to make sure that those contracts you have protect your organization and its employees and its data. It's up to your organization to determine whether it's within your risk appetite to go for that platform. But you're asking the right kinds of questions there.
Yeah, I'm just asking the questions, man. That's all. So, and another comment from John Scott about the sort of digital native stroke immigrant. 2022 EY report suggested that younger people were less serious about security than older people. Digital natives might be more likely to be blasé about the risks, and there's a link there. Now, without looking at the link, reading the report, etc., my initial thoughts are they may seem more blasé, but there is also a very different attitude amongst younger generations, of which I include everybody on this panel because I'm obviously the oldest here. But it's a completely different attitude. People are not so concerned about it. They're almost not as frightened of it as potentially, older generations are. This is something that we need to take advantage of, right?
I think what we've got to consider is that apart from just being multi-generational, we need to consider how people use technology according to their social groups as well. Everybody uses technology differently, and everybody, there will be some people who are more cautious, and it's not to do with their age.
Yes, of course.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and in addition, people learn and express, themselves differently, and we have to take that into consideration very much as teachers and lecturers. So we're always considering how we're putting out information and how that's coming back, and we see that in behaviours, and we see that in the way people save their work and how they file things and how they're organized. And I would say, and this is a generalization, younger generations, from my experience in my college, aren't necessarily treating technology in the same way we do, because I was brought up for it to be very much an extension of reading and writing and storing information. We've got a generation here who very much have been introduced to it socially first.
Yeah.
So this is going back to the trust, where you trust your friends first because there is more benefits from that. So it goes back to looking at us as human beings first. How are we introduced to this technology? And it's not just to do with ages and generations. That will show how we respond to it, but that shows what we need to learn in order to keep ourselves safe as well.
Yeah, I'm no education specialist. I thought it was an interesting question to ask because I thought it could go either way. If I imagine a young person being exposed so much to technology at a young age, it would either be, well, they were so exposed to the threats that naturally they were averse to, they were more naturally untrusting than they were trusting. I think I've just had a thought back. Where does my vigilance come from? Is it because I'm a security specialist, or is it because of something else? And I remember actually
Because you're a young man.
Well, it's also because I've fallen victim to a social engineering attack when I was a teenager. I think many people might remember those emails that all kids used to always send to their friends, like, "Oh, if you don't send this to 5 people, then some monster's going to come get you or something." But I remember accidentally downloading a virus on my mum's computer through one of those emails, and so through that experience, I guess I've been exposed to the true threats, and I figured that, well, is that, I asked myself, is that something that many young people would have had exposed to themselves as well? Or is it more likely that because they use it on a daily basis with high frequency that they become more trusting in it? And I'm interested to see that report from EY to say that they're potentially more blasé. Perhaps that's an educational tool we can use in the future to scare people into believing they've experienced an incident, and maybe that'll increase their vigilance.
Absolutely. Just the last section before we start to close, talking about fortifying defenses, against the next wave of phishing threats. Now, the big thing that all the conversations I've had with, over briefings and forums and things like this, the big thing about AI and the attackers is scale. The ability to scale quite dramatically compared to how attacks have happened in the past. That's what AI gives us. And not only scale, and not just scale in the sense of volume, but also in the breadth of it. So multiple, many more languages. I think the Philippines and Japan is being hit far harder than it ever was, because it's now easier to produce these attacks in different languages because of AI, etc. So when we say fortifying our defenses, is that purely just that education and awareness, or is there more to it than that?
I think it's a little bit of both. When we talk about fortifying our defenses, we talked earlier a little bit about some of the technical controls can put in place. But on the awareness and education side, there's also some automated AI-driven actions that can take place. I forgot to mention this as an example earlier. Through detective mechanisms, you can spot certain human behaviors that you don't want to see across the organization. Some might be a data loss alert that will come up because someone's sending high confidentiality information outside of the business. Well, there are tools available nowadays that once your system detects that this action is taking place, you can automatically send out some awareness materials. And the complexity of that awareness material can be also determined by an individual user's previous behavior. And these can be little micro awareness pieces that appear in Microsoft Teams or can be completed in Outlook. And then, your performance in all of these little educational pieces is ranked against you and your peers. So it's also gamified. So yeah, fortifying your defenses is, for me, it's definitely about enhancing your detective and preventive capability on a technical standpoint. But there's also, AI-driven steps you can take to enhance your workforce's vigilance as well.
Mm.
Yeah, it's completely true, and I think no matter how technical and you make your defences, people are always still going to be fooled by phishing attacks because it's the gateway straight in, and it's the social engineering. So the two have to go hand in hand. There isn't one answer to this. There'll never be a silver bullet, and the more we raise our capabilities, unfortunately, the more the attacks and the attackers will up their game too. So I think it's a game we're going to be playing for a long time, until some wonder product comes along that sort of stops all that. But if that's in the future, we're certainly not there yet.
Yeah, we've heard about wonder products very often, haven't we? I mean, there's always something. I mean, remember even 15 years ago being a product that was like, this is going to be the end of all the issues we're ever going to have, and yet it didn't at all. Just some very quick catch up on comments on here. So, Lorenzo, how can AI be helpful in improving the fragility of the human user? And is it really a matter of using AI or not, or awareness strategy overall? And I think the answer there is, as you said, Rebecca, it's a little bit of everything. Hendrik then responded with human intelligence is important too. That's if you can find it, of course. And then Lorenzo says, and increasingly undervalued, but that's so much the case. So we are drawing to an end here. As usual, we ask our panelists, what can our audience do tomorrow morning when they get to their desks when it comes to better security awareness training with AI? Ben, I'm going to start with you. We started a little bit late, so I'm sure we can run a little bit late. So I'll give you, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute to wax lyrical about this.
First thing people can do when they arrive at their desks. I mean, for me, it's always managing a security incident in any capacity is always about keeping calm and not panicking. So make sure that you start every day in a calm and collective manner. Make sure that anything that comes your way, whether it's work related or a potential social engineering attack, make sure that you approach both in the same manner: cool, calm, and collected.
I like that. It's very zen. That's very zen. I think that could be advice at the end of every single teissTalk. I think that's good. I like it. Rebecca.
Well, we all might suffer AI cyber attack tomorrow. So, how are we going to cope with it or maybe even avoid it? So maybe when you get to your desk tomorrow morning, just take 5 minutes to think, when am I going to lose concentration and my attention at some point today, and use some of your own human intelligence to see if you can counteract the possibility of an artificial intelligence attack, and know yourself in order to essentially avoid disaster.
Yeah, very, very good. Rebecca, Ben, thank you so much. Really appreciate your contributions today. Thank you for coming on. As regards, we had a whole bunch of questions. I've not touched on all of them, so my apologies to Hendrik and to Peter. Well, there's two Peters there, but Peter Lecop. That I didn't get to all of yours. I think today's winner of the teissTalk mug, however, has to be, if only because I've butchered their name, Lorenzo. Please, in the chat, tell me how I should have pronounced that. But you are this week's winner of the teissTalk mug. Congratulations. And all that's left for me is to say, don't forget, next week's, oh, sorry, not next week's, in a couple of weeks, the next Oh, it is next week, 17th. Next week's episode is why Zero Trust Network Access is not your silver bullet, to your point earlier, you mentioned, Rebecca. So that's on the 17th at 4 o'clock. I'll see if I can go and buy a new computer before then. I would like to apologize for the late start and my intermittent video, but then again, intermittent video of me is probably a good thing for you as our audience as well. So once again, Rebecca, Ben, thank you very much indeed. Very much appreciate it. And for everybody else out there, don't forget to stay secure, my friends. And technical problems still persist, it would seem.
Just smile and wave.
Here we go.